Hey everybody, Thomas Joseph here, and today we are tackling one of my favorite things, and that is crispy fried eggplant. Now, oftentimes eggplant parmesan or fried eggplant can be really soggy and bland, and today I'm going to share with you a foolproof formula for making fried eggplant at home, and this will be your go-to recipe. Today I'm using one of these Asian style eggplant. Asian style eggplants are usually more long and narrow as opposed to the European varieties of eggplant, which are a little bit more bulbous. You could certainly use a European style eggplant that you would typically find at a grocery store. The reason I like to use these Asian style eggplants is because they're smaller. You're gonna have more breading on your eggplant to actual eggplant. So you get something that's a little bit more crispy and crunchy than you would if you had a bigger piece of an eggplant. Now, with eggplant in general, it is a very spongy vegetable. It's actually a fruit, but what I'm talking about when I say spongy is you can actually see the flesh. It's filled with thousands and thousands of these little air pockets, and it makes a very spongy texture. What it does is it absorbs moisture. So you need to do one of two things, and that is to either pre-cook your eggplant in advance or salt it. The reason really why I salt my eggplant is to kind of collapse all of these spongy cells so that these slices don't absorb too much moisture, too much oil, because we're going to be frying these eggplants today. So I'm going to take my slices. These are about, I don't know, anywhere between 1/2 of an inch. You could even go a little bit thinner if you wanted to. And I'm cutting them on a bias because I want as much surface area as possible. Again, I want a lot of that wonderful crispy breading coating because that's what's going to give you really great texture to your crispy fried eggplant. And just put these out on a wire rack. Let me move this over here so you guys can see it. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to salt them. So use a generous amount of salt, sprinkle these eggplant on the tops and on the bottoms, and this will sit for about 20 to 30 minutes, and you'll start to see some of the moisture gets pulled out of the eggplant, the cells will start to collapse, and this is exactly what you want. Again, it seems like a fussy step, but in the end, you'll be left with really crispy and not oily at all fried eggplants. So the other thing I just want to mention here, you guys, is that with eggplant, the interior is nice and white, almost ivory in color, but when you do cut into the eggplant, it will start to brown. It's part of this whole process of oxidation, very similar to what happens when you cut apples, and you shouldn't really worry too much about that because in the end, your eggplant, once you bread them and fry them, they're gonna be nice and golden brown, so this color is no issue. Don't lose sleep over it. So I'm gonna let these sit for about 20 to 30 minutes. All right, so it's been 20 minutes and this is all it really takes, you guys, to collapse the cells, to pull out some of that moisture. You can see it's kind of beating up on the slices of the eggplant. And now we just need to blot these off with a paper towel. Again, you could achieve this same process by pre-cooking your eggplant slices. I just feel like that takes a little bit too much work, but some people will do this in the microwave just for, 30 seconds maybe on each side. But the salting really helps, and it also helps to season your eggplant. And now we're ready to start our breading process. And all we are going to do is season up our different layers. So I have a little bit of all-purpose flour here, I have some eggs, and I have some breadcrumbs. These are nice fresh breadcrumbs. You could also use panko breadcrumbs. Those are those dehydrated Japanese style breadcrumbs that are nice and crunchy. Those would be fantastic here. But what you want to do with all of your layers is season them up. So I'm using salt and pepper in each of these 3 layers, and you might be saying, wow, that seems like a lot of seasoning. But since we're kind of stacking these up on one another, we really do need a decent amount of seasoning to make sure that our fried eggplant in the end is nice and flavorful. So I'm just going to mix this up, beat the eggs up a little bit. And whether you're coating eggplant like I am today, or you're breading other things like chicken cutlets, you could do fish like this, you could do other vegetables. This is really the standard breading procedure that will give you a nice crispy, crunchy crust to whatever it is that you're frying. You could also oven bake a lot of the things that I just mentioned as well, but I think frying really gives you that wonderful flavor and texture that we're looking for when it comes to an eggplant parmesan. Now, last but not least, for my breadcrumb mixture here, I'm also going to add in some other flavors. So I have a little bit of grated Parmesan cheese. If you're using cheese in your coating mixture, you want to use something that isn't so moisture rich, so an aged cheese. So that's Parm, like I have today, or you could use a Pecorino. That would be really nice. Again, something that's firm and absent of moisture. And then I have some thyme leaves. So this is a woodsy herb, thyme. It doesn't have a ton of moisture in it, so I wouldn't recommend that you add parsley or something like cilantro, any of those fine herbs that wilt and have a ton of moisture. These woodsy herbs have a lot of texture to them and will hold up during the cooking process. Now I'm just gonna whisk this together, and I'm using shallow dishes. Those are really helpful in breading because you have a lot of surface area. You can coat a lot of items at once. And now we're ready to start breading. I'm going to take my eggplant, and first I'm going to dredge it in flour. Now the flour, what it does is it adheres to any of the moisture on the eggplant slices, and it acts as a surface for the eggs to then hold on to. So dredge in the flour. You can knock off any excess flour. You don't want too much, otherwise it's going to create clumps and little gummy pockets in your breading. And then they go right into the egg here. And then last but not least, we're going to take our egg-coated eggplant slices, and they're going to go right into these wonderful breadcrumbs, these seasoned breadcrumbs. And the really great thing about breading this process is that you can really bread things in advance. You can't dredge things in flour in advance because what happens is it creates that gummy layer on whatever it is that you're breading. But the process of adding the eggs and the breadcrumbs, what you're doing, you could do this in advance and it creates a wonderful crust. And actually, the longer that you keep it on, the more kind of crispy, crunchy shell you'll get in the end. So I'm just taking my breadcrumbs and kind of pressing them firmly into the eggplant slices, and then I'm going to put this right back onto this wire rack here, and I'm gonna let these guys sit for about like a half an hour or so, and that crust will form nicely, and we'll be ready to fry these guys. All right, so our oil is about 380 degrees, and 375 is a really great temperature for frying these eggplant slices. And I only have about 1/4 of an inch, maybe even 1/2 of an inch of a neutral flavored oil here, something like a safflower or grapeseed oil, something that can reach a high heat without burning or smoking. So now my eggplant slices have rested. You can see they've created this nice, really great crust to them. And I'm going to just gently place them in the oil here. And these will take about 2 minutes per side. You want to give them a good flip after maybe about 1.5 minutes until they're nice and golden brown. And then you can enjoy these eggplant slices just as is, maybe topped with a wonderful arugula salad. But I'm going to dress these up with a little bit of marinara sauce and some cheese because I think a lot of people really like to take their fried eggplant to the next level and make a delicious eggplant parmesan. And usually that's where the trouble comes in. When you add the sauce and the cheese, it sogs up all of the breadcrumbs, that wonderful crispy coating that you've created. And I'm gonna share some tricks in avoiding that. So these are gonna cook for just about 1.5 minutes on one side, and then we'll flip. All right, so we're approaching about 1 minute, and you wanna make sure when you're adding your eggplant slices, whenever you're frying anything, that you don't overcrowd the pan. I have just enough slices in this pan where they're not really overlapping, because if you overcrowd the pan, what it's gonna do is it's gonna bring the temperature of the oil down, and all of that oil is gonna absorb into your breadcrumbs. Some of these are turning nice and golden around the side, so I'm gonna give them a good flip. Look at that, you guys. That looks amazing. And these are gonna cook for about 1.5 minutes on this next side, and then we'll be ready to dress them in a little bit of sauce and some cheese. So it's been another 1.5 minutes, you guys. Look at how beautiful and golden brown these eggplant slices are. Now that resting time, that 30 minutes of just coating the eggplant and letting them sit really does help to create a wonderful crust that's almost impenetrable by the oil. So again, this will help in your eggplant not being too oily and soggy. That is a really great and important trick. Now, another thing that I'm doing here is I'm removing my eggplant slices to a wire rack set over a rimmed baking sheet. And again, whenever I'm frying anything, you guys, I prefer to do this as opposed to putting this on a paper towel lined plate, because what happens is that paper towel in direct contact with the food, it creates steam, and that, you know, wonderful crisp coating that you spent so much time creating is actually going to get pretty soggy. Since we are frying these lovely guys, we need to season them with a little bit of salt as they come out of the oil. And again, you can serve these eggplant slices up just as is. I mean, how fantastic would this be with some sort of dipping sauce, whether it be a tomato sauce like this, or even a creamy dressing would be really fantastic. But today, I'm going to take a few of these slices. I'm going to bake them with a little bit of marinara sauce and some cheese. I'm gonna take about 3 slices. I have a baking dish. Now you can do this, if you wanted to do all of them, you certainly could do that in a bigger baking dish. And now take your favorite marinara sauce, and you wanna make sure that you're not using too much. This is actually a thing that a lot of people do with their pizzas as well, where they overdress their pizzas with tomato sauce and cheese, and it ends up being soggy and not crisp. So just take a tiny bit, a little bit of tomato sauce, and put it over the top. Now with the heat in the oven, this tomato sauce will kind of change its texture and become a little bit more liquidy. So don't worry if you feel like you're not adding enough here or you're being too conservative, because again, with the heat, it's gonna kind of simmer down over the eggplant. Now, I have 2 versions of mozzarella cheese here in front of me. Now, I have a store-bought version that's pre-shredded, or you can buy this in the block form. And this is a great cheese to use for this. Also, a cheese like a provolone cheese would be fantastic here, because the moisture content is kind of locked up in the cheese, and it's not going to exude too much liquid and moisture. That in contrast to fresh mozzarella. Now, fresh mozzarella is typically sold in these balls. You can actually see how much liquid there is because it sits in a liquid. Typically, that's how it's sold. And fresh mozzarella is really fantastic in that it gives you nice stringiness as it's baked, and it gets nice and gooey, but it also releases a lot of moisture. So you really have to be careful with fresh mozzarella. And if you're going to use it, if it is your preference, which that's totally fine, you want to make sure that you're not using too much of it. So I'm going to just kind of take a few pieces and place them over the top, and I'm not going to overdress these eggplant slices with too much cheese. I'll even do one that has the store-bought cheese so we can look at the difference. And now these are going to go into the broiler, a low broil, for about 2 to 3 minutes until the cheese is nice and melted and bubbles slightly. And then I'm going to show you how crisp they are. So, all right, guys, it's been 2 minutes, and these are beautiful. You can see the difference in the 2 different cheeses. So this is the fresh mozzarella here, and this is that kind of typical store-bought mozzarella, which browns up nicely. But either way you go, you can see that by using just a little bit of cheese and a little bit of sauce, you're not ending up with something that's really super soupy, I'll say. So I like to just finish this off with a little bit of fresh basil. You can do this if you'd like or not. And a little bit of olive oil here. And I can't wait to try this. The eggplant on the inside is nice and soft, but it's still nice and crispy on the outside here, guys. So amazing, you guys. Now remember all of those steps that you need in creating the crispiest eggplant slices you can, and you will have the most delicious eggplant parmesan, I promise you. Try this recipe and let us know how it's going for you guys. Reach out to us using the hashtag Kitchen Conundrums. Enjoy, guys. And as always, guys, click like and subscribe.